Coogs house. Tuesday was weird. It was down, it was up. Uzan's returning, but people were leaving. But make no mistake about it, Houston's reloaded and is making a run at the national championship.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. Whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. I appreciate you making your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. I'm doing the conversation, but you don't know what to say. Tell us in the comments down below. I don't know, do you consider goldfish an animal cracker? If that confused you, I'm confused too. The everydayers know this Milos Uzan train has been building up, so thank you for being an everydayer and tuning in each day. But Milos Uzan officially coming back to Houston Cougars. More on that in the first segment. I do want to talk about what this does to Houston's rotations and what the roster movement looks like in the second segment. And at the end of the day, I want to talk also in the third segment about like how this is kind of a win for modern college basketball for a lot of folks that maybe don't like the way rosters get put together and not put together. But first things first, the news of the day Tuesday was initially going to be bad. It was initially going to be bad, to be downhill. And all of the insinuations over the long weekend were that Houston was going to be making a splash in their roster. You had the Landon Gosling tweet with the money signs and lots of people hinting at what they thought was going to happen. And people got messages about what was coming, and people got messages from people who might know what was coming about. Like things were leading in a certain direction. Full disclosure, I got told there would be some movement besides just Milos Uzan by someone I'm going to say I trust. I'll leave it at that. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to record a full episode. I don't want to know. Like, they won't tell me what was happening. Sounds good. At like 7:30 in the morning, we get the alert on Twitter that Pop Isaacs, who had just transferred into Houston, was leaving Houston. And that was like ding, 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 ding. Okay, that's the movement here. Right. Less than 20 minutes later, Milos Uzan is also reported to come back to Houston. I think I saw Tipton edits with it first. That's typically where these things come from for college sports. But I also saw all the big national players posting it. Duarte posted it too from the Houston Chronicle. Everyone's running with it, right? And I say all that to say that by 8 o'clock in the morning, the dust had kind of settled, and everyone was like, what just happened to the Houston Cougars men's basketball program? Now, admittedly, I think everyone alludes to like who they've been hearing from, whatever, about how stuff was coming into fruition, coming into fold. It sounds like, though, both in things I'd heard and things that Kelvin Sampson said publicly in his availability at 11 a.m. on Tuesday, that this was not anyone telling Pop Isaacs he needed to leave. This was not that kind of a conversation, but it's also not the kind of conversation it sounds like where it was like things were going to be guaranteed or given to Pop Isaacs, given the deep roster Houston accumulated. Sounds like Pop Isaacs looked around, saw Milos Uzan about to come back as another guard in the rotation, and was like, you know what? For the betterment of his own career, he needed to go somewhere where he could start, somewhere he could play more point guard minutes and do those kinds of things. And best of luck to him at Texas A&M. This is not like an ill-wishing kind of thing. I kind of wanted to see the pairing. I thought it was a very, natural pair to put in where LJ Cryer left. We'll talk more about rotation in the second segment, but I didn't think it was so horribly ill fit. And again, I was encouraged by the growth that Houston saw with Cryer and how that could happen with Pop as well. I also want to point out that, like, based on some retweets of stuff that Milos Uzan put out there, I still firmly believe that Milos wanted Pop there. Those two guys are both Vegas kids. They did some high school basketball together at different points. I don't have any reason to believe that they wouldn't have played well together from that standpoint, from a getting along standpoint or whatever, right? And frankly, for what it's worth, they probably would have both been all Big 12 caliber players. That's all not to say that if I had to pick one, Houston figuratively picked the right one, right, to say the least. Now, I think the bigger piece was not necessarily Pop Isaacs fitting in with Milos Uzan in the starting lineup, but how the rotations were going to go. And Kingston Fleming is a 5-star caliber kid coming in at the backup point guard spot as a freshman. He's going to get a lot of minutes. You're looking at over 20 minutes per game out of that spot playing point guard. He's that talented, right? You got Isaiah Harwell, a guy that lit up every of the highest levels of high school basketball. He may or may not start. We'll talk about rotations in the second segment, but he's going to get a lot of minutes. Emmanuel Sharp, most outstanding player in the Big 12 tournament, most outstanding player in your regional. He's going to get a lot of minutes and start. That's all of the backcourt position. Suddenly, there's just not that many. We hadn't even talked about Mercy Miller, hadn't talked about Cordell Jefferson. Lots of things. Chase McCarty at the wing, all kinds of things happening there, right? I almost wonder if things like seeing Chase McCarty's development in the last year up close and in person, if the staff being really enthused by him, if it's really more of the bench guys kind of pushing their way into the rotation than the starters, right? As far as what led to Pop Isaacs leaving. I have to point out, too, that Milos Uzan coming back means that Houston returns 3 of the 5 starters from a team that was 65 seconds away from a national championship a year ago. That's really, really freaking good in today's college basketball. It's good in any day's college basketball. It's really, really freaking good in today's college basketball. Ultimately, it sounds like Milos, and I have not talked to the Uzan camp. This is very much like third, fourth party, so take this as the game of telephone that it is. Did not get enough of the guarantees to warrant going into the draft. Typically, if you look in the second round, you want a handful of teams, because if a single thing goes differently in the first few picks, or even the first few picks of the second round, everyone's draft board can change, and then you're left just you're stuck there, right, waiting for one of those teams to stay true to their word, or you're hoping you don't get the phone call where it's like, hey, sorry, buddy, things have changed. Didn't think such would be available. Didn't think this trade would happen or whatever, right? And so without enough of that, I firmly think that if Uzan had gone to the NBA draft, he'd be drafted around pick 41, 42, someone that needs a point guard that plays in defense, shooting threes. That's a very common skill set. But what this does mean is that Uzan gets that feedback. Milos gets the feedback from the combine. He gets to return to Houston and implement that feedback in his game and go back to trying out the NBA thing next year. We saw Marcus Sasser do this. He came back and was a first-team All-American and was the American Athletic Conference Player of the Year. Jamal Shed did this, returned to Houston, and was an All-American and the Big 12 Player of the Year. Now, Milos Uzan is doing this and hoping to do the same. I don't say that they're the only Houston Cougars that have done this, but Quentin's done. Guys have done this across Kelvin Sampson's time. Kelvin Sampson's always been very adamant that this is like a big way, the key way that you need to be selfish for yourself as a college basketball player, because this is your career, right? Milos investigated every point. It sounds like even when Milos called Sampson on like Friday, Saturday, it sounded like from the press conference, right? Sampson was like, listen, take some more time, talk to your family, right? I think that's also really interesting because we hypothesized on this show on Friday's episode, so recorded Thursday, that after the Thursday presser with the Golden State Warriors, Milos Uzan was kind of adding up enough of these pro workout, one-on-one workouts or small group workouts where like it felt like enough teams were interested, right, that he might not be coming back. And then it sounds like by late Friday, early Saturday, somewhere in there, he knew he was coming back. And that shift, I think, is indicative of what the communication was like. I really like this as far as him continue to come back to implement, to put a cement or implement a sticker or something on his legacy at Houston. He had some of the most memorable moments of the Houston Cougar season last year. It's one of the most memorable seasons in Houston Cougar basketball history, right? It's kind of weird to think that he's only been a Houston Cougar one season, honestly. When you think back to like the early trials and tribulations of November, being 4-3, being in foul trouble in a lot of those games and having to miss crucial moments, to then like, oh, he hits the game winner against Purdue in what's effectively a road game in the Sweet 16. Oh, he locks up Zakai Ziegler. Oh, he's winning the Arizona game in the Big 12 championship. Oh, he's on fire on the road against Texas Tech and Lubbock. Like those are moments of his that you almost forget, like, oh, that was the first time he had a chance to do that in Houston, right? And so if I were guessing, we'll talk more later, I guess, what I think his feedback will be like, because I want to make sure we have a second to talk before we get into the rotations conversation about our buddies over at Monarch Money. Because right now, you might be checking your bank account, like, okay, the Houston's come back, I got to look at flights and hotels and Final Fours and Indianapolis next year and where could they be? And go and get on that early. All of a sudden, your bank account's like, oh, all the money's gone. Where did it go? Monarch Money is your personal CFO, give you full visibility and control over your finances, but it's not just like a budgeting app and a tracking service. It's complete financial command center. Track all your accounts, investment, spending all in one place. You can stop managing money and start actually building wealth. I teach, I coach, I podcast, wife, multiple levels of income, coming from different places. Easy to put all of those things into one place, one dashboard, one app. That is Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first full year. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs here. And now that we're here, I should probably post the official, as we're looking at this depth chart, scholarship opportunities for the foreseeable future of the Houston Cougars. I do still have Ramon Walker on next year's team. I am operating as if he is on the team and going to have that waiver cleared. But I should point out that Ramon Walker is still pending a waiver with the NCAA about getting a medical red shirt for this past season. That would also, you notice, if you're paying attention to numbers, bring Houston to 14 scholarship players on the roster. That's interesting because theoretically, whenever House passes, Houston will actually get 15 full scholarships on the basketball program. And they've always had 15 roster spots as well. That being said, we've talked about it before in this program. Kelvin Sampson actually really, really likes to stick to that 14 number, because then if all chaos breaks loose in October and some crazy good talented guy that you had a relationship with recruiting from beforehand or whatever just hits the market and is available, then suddenly you have a spot for him, right? You don't have to move things around. And frankly, we both know in watching Sampson coach, getting past that 8th or 9th guy on the floor is, you're looking at guys that are more impacting your team in locker rooms and culture and practice and stuff like that, right? So he likes to have 14, counting Ramon Walker, the 3 seniors of sort to be Emmanuel Sharp, returning Milos Uzan, and then Khalifa Sacco, who's coming from Sam Houston State. We talked about him earlier in the spring, but go check that out, that episode. Really, really impactful big man coming off the bench, hopefully. Jojo, Tugler, and Seth Lott, big men representing the junior class. The rising sophomores are Cordelius Jefferson, and Mercy Miller. And then freshmen, after a pair of red shirts, are Jacob McFarland, Chase McCarty. Jacob McFarland was actually in his 3rd year on campus this season, but after an injury red shirt last season, still has his freshman year of eligibility marking. Chase McCarty, coming off that red shirt year last year, is supposed to be killing it in the spring. We'll check him out as well. And then the star-studded number 1 class America, Kingston Fleming, Isaiah Harwell, Chris Sinak, and Bryce Jackson. I should say that some publications have Houston's number 2, some places number 1. Just depends what publication you're looking at for the recruiting class rankings for 2025. And the natural conversation is, well, what's Houston going to do next in terms of their actual rotation, right? Not who's on the roster. Now they're figured that out. Kelvin Sampson did say they don't intend on adding in this cycle. So they're done adding. Now we know who's on the team. Who plays? Now, in terms of who actually plays, I would look at this like you have to play and start Milos Uzan, Emmanuel Sharp, Jojo Tugler. I think that sounds like a duh kind of moment to folks that follow the program, obviously. But for reference, that trio of all trios in college basketball returns the highest plus or minus net rating of any returning trio. They had the 2nd in all of college basketball last year. The first was actually Arizona State. They also led all trios, or combinations of 3 players, in last season's plus or minus net rating in quad one games, where they were plus 32 in 10 quad one games in the regular season. Pretty freaking ridiculous. Those three guys as a dominant force on the floor means that they're going to start. And I think a lot of people assume at least one freshman's going to start because there are 3 5-star freshmen coming in. So my first look here is if you only started one freshman here, where'd it go? I had too many of these. Let's just talk about if I start 2, actually. Because I think weirdly, like, this might be the one that gets people the most excited. You start Milos at the point, Emmanuel at the 2. The wing would be Isaiah Harwell, and then the 4 would be Chris Sinak with Jojo Tugler playing the center position. That's 2 freshmen starting in Isaiah Harwell and Chris Sinak. You'd also theoretically then have Kingston Fleming, Mercy Miller, Chase McCarty, Jacob McFarland, and Said Lott coming off the bench in the first round of rotations. Cordell and Ramon, if he comes back, Khalifa Sacco, all coming on. And then I think you have to redshirt Bryce Jackson at this point there. Another thing people want to see, though, is potentially look at what 2 point guards might look like, because people are excited about Kingston Fleming and explosive athleticism he brings. So you'd theoretically be starting Kingston at the point, Milos at the 2, Emmanuel at the 3, Snack at the 4, and Jojo at the 5. I think this lineup's got a lot of great defensive possibilities. I do think, though, that you essentially are just turning Milos into a off guard there, as much as you're trying to play 2 point guards into fast break opportunities, and you probably will get some of that. Kingston's better used as a point at this point in his career, and so I think he'd be your main point guard there. You wouldn't get the true 2 point guard look. You'd be kind of turning Milos into a 2 there. For what it's worth, some people want to talk about what happens if you don't start any freshmen, because while I don't think it'll happen, you theoretically do have lineups where you're not going to have any freshmen on the floor. You know, Kelvin Sampson likes to bring those guys along a little bit slower than some, but faster than others. The bigger lineup option here would be Chase McCarty and Jacob McFarland starting at the wing and 4 spot with Jojo, Emmanuel, and Milos. For what it's worth, McCarty has been killing it. And as a redshirt freshman, he technically qualifies for what we're talking about here as far as not new to college hoops. McCarty has been killing it, though, and so that you can see that happening. McFarland, also a redshirt guy, could be playing in that spot as well. You have a smaller lineup option, too, where you maybe start Mercy Miller at the 2 and Emmanuel at the 3, Chase McCarty at the 4. I don't know where you put Sinak and McFarland if they're playing centers or big guys. So those guys kind of got tossed around the back half of that rotation chart there. But ultimately, the conversation here is what you think is going to happen. And what I really, in my heart of hearts, think they're going to do is go with this 2 freshman lineup, just based on where I think Mercy and Kingston will come and impact the game the most. We also saw Auburn get to a Final Four last year playing their backup point guard, Tahad Pettiford, over 22 minutes, almost 24 minutes actually per game. In that backup role, able to do a lot of damage, scoring, attacking, etc. Kingston's a very different player than Pettiford. I don't mean to liken them in that way. I do think their impact can be the same. We're going to see Pettiford drafted this summer as a backup freshman point guard off of Auburn last season. That's how strong his year was. I think, well, I don't project Kingston to be leaving for the draft next year. I think that's up to him and his family after the year happens. I do think he can have that kind of impact in winning as a backup point guard. I do think Mercy Miller is going to get a lot of run at backup too. I have heard great things about Chase McCarty. I do think that you're going to have some Jacob McFarland there. Full disclosure, I think Said Lott's going to get the nod at the backup center spot over Khalifa Sacco right now. I can see it changing over the course of the season. The biggest thing I think people worry about, though, is as you're looking at this, like where those points come from when you lost LJ Cryer. Sinak can hit the Juwan Roberts averages. I don't know if he'll like their daily or like he might not hit the big free throws at the end of the Baylor game or the Duke. He might not want him on the line then. He might. We'll see as the season goes. I think the bigger concern, though, is like how to replace the offensive production that LJ lost, especially after Pop Isaacs hits the transport as A&M. You know, it doesn't mean it's Mercy Miller time. We saw flashes from him last year as a true freshman. I think Isaiah Harwell is going to find his way into some of those points as well. He averaged over 16 points per game in the EYBL Scholastic League. That's the highest level of high school basketball in America. He shot 49% from the field in doing so. Chase McCarty in a similarly high, not quite the same, but playing in the Northeastern prep school leagues, had 24 points per game in high school. He's a 6'6" wing. You got to think he can continue to light up shooting. He's a great shooter as well. Bringing in Kingston Fleming can get Milos off a ball and get him some more of those kind of shots. You have to imagine part of the feedback was that Milos Uzan needs to be more direct and impactful and heading downhill and those kinds of things. So I think that's also going to be where you see on the points, continued growth out of Jojo Tugler as well. And do you see Emmanuel Sharp to make the leap from like breaking into double digits last season to getting up to more like 15 or 16 points per game? And you can kind of piecemeal it there without having to just like all focus it on one guy. I think that's the strongest way to do it as far as looking for where we're going to get that production out of. But the offense will look much more pro-oriented next year. Chris Sinak is a true, perimeter big man, a stretch four in a lot of ways. He's a center. I don't mean to say he's a three-point shooter, but he can dribble the ball. He can handle it. He's strong. He's strong with the ball. So you want to get him out in space and take advantage of defenders with that. That's going to open up a lot of things. It's going to look a lot more like the Jarris Walker offense. Not that Sinak's quite the shooter that Jarris was, but he's probably more fluid with his handle. And you're also going to have, frankly, great shooters around him in Emmanuel and Isaiah, Chase McCarty, Milos, like a lot of that kind of stuff. And then Kingston Fleming downhill, get the whole thing spinning is a great way to get things going. I think this team has a chance to be as talented offensively as last year's team. The big thing with last year's team and why they were 65 seconds away from a national championship game, from the national championship, was that they had a better offense than any team Sampson had before that. And then ultimately, in those last 65 seconds, they had 4 turnovers in the final 4 possessions. So you still got to find a way to be better than that in those clutch moments. But I think they are on the right track towards that. And so we're following that and kind of thinking through that, putting things together on that over the course of the offseason. Before we get too far away from Tuesday, I do want to talk about Tuesday as a success for something that some people don't like. But first, Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Cougs here, talking Houston Cougars, bringing back Milos Uzan, officially a Houston Cougar for one more season after he forgoes the NBA draft, took the feedback from the combine returns. Yes, Houston lost Pop Isaac along the way. Got to lose some to win some, crack some eggs, make an omelet. Pick your saying there, right? But I want to talk about something that this is a successful moment for, that I think a lot of old school Southwest Conference Houston Cougar fans think as the boogeyman. And that is NIL, right? Name, image, and likeness dollars are a key part of this story for Milos and so many other guys as they're going through this situation now. Now, Sampson, I should stress as we talk through this, Kelvin Sampson is adamant, and I have every reason to believe him. And everyone you talk to near the program or talk to near to Kelvin would say, Kelvin does not talk NIL with recruits. It's not his bag, not his cup of tea. Houston basketball players are fairly competitively compensated across the landscape, right? That is not to say that they're not getting paid. That's to say that Kelvin, when evaluating players, is not making those judgments, and he ain't talking that dollars and cents with those guys, right? He's talking minutes, he's talking fit, he's talking rotation, he's talking competing, right? But NIL is a part of college basketball. It's part of college sports now. This story, Milos Uzan coming back to Houston, does not happen in a pre-NIL era. I want to say that one more time. This story, Milos Uzan coming back to Houston to make a run at a national championship, does not happen in a pre-NIL era, right? The way this works out is now, whether it was Milos this time or Jamal Shed before or Marcus Sasser before that, guys get to go test the waters with an agent and representation in the draft process. That representation has experience, has been there before, has other clients that have done this, has relationships with people and teams that can get their guys and workouts in front of people and understands the process. This is not just a mom and pop shop anymore. This is professional, right? That way you can hear the feedback as a player, get the information, and get honest opinions. I'm not the biggest pro agent guy a lot of the time. I think agents can be kind of slimy, but this is a moment where having an agent helps because they know that, frankly, if you turn down the NBA and come back and get your college money, you're going to get an NIL deal to represent you in that as well. And if you went the pro route and didn't get drafted and didn't get more than a 10-day, they ain't making a whole lot of bank on that, right? So it's actually in their best interest to get you in the right situation, okay? I also think that having done this before, the agents get to do this every single year. The player gets to do this once, maybe twice if they come back and go a second time, right? That's not enough experience to understand the situation at all, right? And so these agents are able to more easily and more realistically guide guys through these processes, right? These representatives, the representation can help guys in ways they couldn't have done 8-9 years ago, right? So that's one layer of this. The other piece of this is that Houston has managed to make themselves competitive in the basketball NIL world. I want to say I saw the last one was top 10. They're in that upper percentile, especially when we consider that they're top 10 in talent as well, number 1 in talent, right? Like I think that's an interesting way to look at things. They're up there with that. And in looking at roughly where Milos would have been drafted, right? Milos Uzan was projected to be around the mid-40s, so let's say 45, because we have a very close to home example in Jamal Shead being picked 45th a year ago, right? Jamal Shead being picked 45th a year ago with a contract because Toronto told him they wouldn't let him fall. A handful of teams that told him they wouldn't let him fall past them, right? He gets that contract with Toronto because Toronto liked him. They wanted him, right? They wanted him in Toronto. He signed a 3-year deal worth about $1.8 million per year, right? And then got a signing bonus, right? I'm not a teacher, coach, podcaster. Who am I to be talking about whose money? I'm not trying to pocket watch other people, right? But I'm not saying Houston's NIL program could have given Milos 1.8. Maybe they did. I have no idea. I do think, though, in looking at everything else they've doled out that we know of publicly, they were probably competitive and close. And then suddenly, if you're Milos Uzan, this is not about taking a shot at $1.8 million. This is about taking a shot at what's best for you and your career. And that's a whole different set of math that did not function that way before NIL money, right? And so this does change the game. Change the game for Milos, change the game for Jamal, change the game for Marcus, and then a bigger college basketball picture. I mean, we had 3 different players while the alerts were on my phone for Tipton Edits to tweet the thing out, right? Alex Condon, a big-time big guy, 6'11", 7-footer from Florida. Yaxel Lendenberg was like a constant climber. Was like, can he get into the first round or not at UAB? He gets to come back to college and go to Michigan, right? Carter Knox is going to return to play at Arkansas. These guys get to make this decision based on the basketball side of things because the money side of things is no longer as pressing of an issue. Now, again, they're not maybe getting the exact same dollars and cents they would if they got drafted at pick 30th or pick 29th or whatever, but they're getting something competitive. And that means they're allowed to look at things differently. And I'm telling you, people worry about NIL and transfer portal and what this has done to, they think about the negative side of it. And I'm not saying those don't exist, right? It's hard to root for teams when guys are so fluid. And Sampson's, one of the things he's done so well is keep the core cultural pieces of the University of Houston intact. So many returners. They rarely lose guys that play games in rotation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we think about all those negatives, and we don't think about these positives. Because had NIL not been around, you probably didn't get that season where Marcus Sasser is an All-American at the University of Houston. You probably don't get that magical best player in America season out of Jamal Shead. You probably don't get the magic's going to happen next year out of Milos Uzan. That changes the math in a way that makes our enjoyment as fans undeniably better, right? And so while there are kinks to work out and things are not perfect, NIL, transfer portal, et cetera, as much as we rag on it, we do need to make sure we give it positive praise when it comes into play here. And it absolutely comes into play here. Shouts to Landon Gosling and those guys for all the things they do with that. Locked on Coogs be here covering things more each and every day. Got some stuff we're working on that's exciting for you in the coming days and weeks, so be sure you tune in to that. As more things happen with the football team, 2026 basketball recruits, whenever they hire that softball coach, anything going on, Houston Cougars will be here each and every day. Not just when big stuff happens, although we are here when big stuff happens. We're here each and every weekday at Locked On Cougs. Hit subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we're live. Locked On Cougs is a prime member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team, now Milos Uzan team, for one more year every day. Go Cougs.